Here's one thing that I want you to know. Here's one thing I want you to know. Receiving the Word and doing the Word are not the same. You get that? When we receive the Word, the thing that makes the Word life is not when we just hear it. What makes the Word become life and become relevant to us is when we begin to put it into practice. That's the piece that's the most difficult. It's easy to sit and listen and go, oh, wow, Pastor, that was awesome. Like y'all do all the time. Thank you. Whoever said that, thank you. Give you your $1 later. But the thing is it's when we begin to act upon it, put it into practice, it becomes relevant, it becomes life to us, it becomes real, it becomes alive in us. And so we've been talking over the last several weeks about the grave robber. We've been talking about the miracles of Jesus, or the signs, the 7 signs that we see in the book of John. We see in John chapter 2 where Jesus turns the water into wine. And we ooh and ah, how awesome. And then we go to John chapter 4 and we see Jesus heal the royal official's son and 20 miles away. And everybody oohs and ahs. And then we go into John chapter 5 and we see the man at the pool of Bethesda, and Jesus comes. He's been there, it says, for 38 years. And Jesus comes and heals him. And we're like, oh. And then we go to John chapter 6 and he feeds the 5,000, and then we get in line for fish and chips. Right? And when it says 5,000, that's really not even fair or accurate, because we believe that's only 5,000 men. That doesn't anticipate what their wives, their children that might have been there. We're talking about anywhere from 10 to even potentially 20,000 people that Jesus fed on that day. But then right after that in John chapter 6, we see the next thing, the next amazing sign that Jesus does, and he walks on the water. Talk about hanging 10. Hey, think about it for just a moment, right? It's in the middle of the storm. And Jesus is walking on the water. I don't know if he's like, hey, everybody's surfing now. I don't know is he hearing that going on? I don't know. But the point is, he's walking on the water. My personal opinion is it's all going around him, but the water knows who it is, and it just bows. It calms. And where he's walking, it's nice and smooth. Everywhere else around him is chaos. Oh, that right there will preach by itself. Listen, there may be chaos going on. Get in Jesus' arms. It's smooth sailing. And then we step over into John chapter 9, and we see the 6th sign where the man that was born blind. In fact, the Pharisees, the rulers themselves would say, well, we've never seen this happen where someone born blind is now made to see. And here's Jesus and his power to create. Listen, just thinking about that whole thing for a moment. Here, let me put this on your eyes. I don't know. That just doesn't sound very appetizing or appealing or any of those things, right? But we see the creator of the universe step into that moment and change that man's life. And we ooh and we awe at the wonders of God, the supernatural provision, the ability to overcome the laws of gravity and the laws of nature and the distance and the time and all the things that he does. And so then we come to John chapter 11 and the 7th sign. And it says this in John 11:39. It says, and he says, remove the stone, Jesus said. Martha, the dead man's sister, told him, Lord, he already stinks. It's been 4 days. And Jesus said, didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you heard me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd standing here, I said this, so they may believe that you sent me. After he said this, he shouted with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. I was just, I was just reading it like, I was just doing it like I read it, right? Get the defibrillators. I've been waiting all morning to do that. Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out bound hand and foot with linen strips, with his face wrapped in a cloth. And Jesus said to them, loose him and let him go. And we all stand there like, awesome. Right? I mean, that's what, when we're reading these things, that's actually should be what's happening. We shouldn't be reading it like, loose him, let him go. But that's the way, Pastor Tiffany talked about the Walking Dead. That's the way that we live our lives. We read the stories and we read the things that Jesus did, and it's like, yeah, I heard that when I was 5 years old. But when we begin to get a revelation of it, whether I'm 5 or 50 or there ought to be something on the inside of me. The same Jesus that I'm reading about is the same Jesus that abides in me, and the same Jesus that I'm waiting for to return so that I can spend eternity with him. And there ought to be something that ought to excite us on the inside. No, I'm not saying you got to jump and hoop and holler. I did that just to exaggerate the point and maybe get a few people awake. But we ooh and we ah and we say, oh God. And of course, remember, we've talked about this from the beginning. We've talked about God making the impossible, making our impossible possible. Making our impossible. And our impossible may not be that we need wine. And our impossible may not be that we need to see, or that we're lame, or we're sick. Maybe our impossible is that we've got a son or a daughter that's far from God. When are you going to read about that? When are you going to do that one, Pastor? Listen, I may not read about that, but can I tell you, the miracles that we read right now tell me that Jesus has the ability to do all of those things. And so if we were to kind of break it down just a little bit this morning, we'd say Act 1. We got to go to New York, and we went to 3 plays. There's a lot of things that have happened since I've been married that I would have never done 30 years ago. One, doing what I'm doing right now. When I tell people that I was a fine arts coordinator, which I did for 10 years, and they look at me like, I said, listen, I married the drama queen. And she made me fine arts king. And so you got to do what you got to do. Anyway, but the point is we read these things, but we got to go to New York and got to go to plays, and they have all these acts. And if as I was looking at this, there's kind of some acts here that we don't see. Act 1, Lazarus raised from the dead. Act 2, Jesus is raised from the dead. And we're getting ready to see Act 3. You know what Act 3 is? The dead in Christ shall rise, and those that are alive, or those that remain, shall be called up, and we shall be raised. Oh, aren't we waiting on Act 3? We're standing at the precipice. We're standing at that moment, that just any moment now. Any moment now. I really believe that. I believe we can look at Scripture and we can look at the signs of the time. And listen, I realize I'm 48 years old, and as long as I can remember, I've heard it all my life. It seems like, the Lord's coming back, the Lord's coming back. I remember 88 reasons that Jesus was coming in 1988. Y'all remember that? If you've been in the church long enough, man, we've had some goofiness and we've had a lot of things. But it's... And the sad thing is because we've heard it so long, now we begin to get cold in our heart. That's why when we read it, loose him, let him go. Because we've lost the awe and wonder of God. Listen, I don't know if you recognize it this morning, But we should stand in awe of the awesomeness of His presence. Oh, we do this all the time. Yeah, we may do this all the time, but as soon as we start taking it for granted, it can cease. Whenever we come into His presence, we ought to come with an awe and a reverence. I mean, anywhere in my notes, but I remember growing up, man, you didn't get up and go to the bathroom, and the pastor would say, "Scott, sit down." Right? I'm telling you. Hey, there's been more than one time, and it probably only happened twice. My daddy picked me up and took me out. No, because he's taking me to the bathroom. Man, I remember being in that car. Man, I didn't know you could wear kids out over the console. Yeah. Oh, I remember. Because if you didn't act straight, act right. Why? Because there was a fear and a reverence and an awe of the things of God, and we've lost that a little bit in the church, and we've lost it even in our everyday life. That's no big deal. Loose Him and let Him go. And there's something that's awesome about that. Because if He said that to Lazarus, He'll say that to you. But as we go through this, listen, I read the end of the story. I read it where he shouts, and I won't do it again. Not until second service. Now, don't tell him. Please don't tell him. And if you're coming, just like, maybe shriek out in the second service. Really, just, woo! Do something like that. And then it really set it off, you know. But anyway. If you do that, I'll laugh so hard. Oh, that's awesome. God's so good. But I read the end of the story. But that's the end of the story. And that's the exciting part, right? But there's all the things that happen in between, all the way. See, in this passage, if you were to read, and we're not going to do it this morning, I know Michael's really discouraged because last week he loved the fact that I read all 41 verses. And when I told him I wanted to do it this morning, he's like, oh. Anyway, no, but the thing is, in this passage, we see the ebb and flow of emotions. There's a great grief and great rejoicing. In this passage, we see the purpose of all miracles. In verse 4, Jesus said, He said this sickness, talking about the sickness of Lazarus, will not end in death, but it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. That's the purpose of all miracles. So that God would be glorified. In this passage, we see God's timing. In verse 6, when Jesus heard that he was sick, He stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. You know, Jesus, when he gets the note, and if you read it, you gotta get this. When he reads this note, it says that they send a messenger or whatever it is, and it says, the one that you love is sick. Well, let's see. I love my mom, and I love John. I love who's the one that I love? Of course, he knows. He knows all things. But in this, it says that when he gets the message that he's sick, it says that he stays 2 more days. Have you ever felt like that you've been in those 2 more days with Jesus? Hey, where are you? I asked you 3 days ago. But we see God's timing. And I'll just say this real quickly in regards to that. His timing and His ways are perfect. He is perfect in all of His ways. We see in this passage in verse 25 the revelation of Jesus when He says, I am the resurrection and the life. That was no small statement that he made. It was a revelation of who he was. In fact, if you go through John, there's actually 7 declarations that Jesus made of himself, saying, I am, and this is the 5th one. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. In this passage, we see this. We see the compassion of Jesus. You know, guys, the only verse you know in the whole entire Bible, John 11:35. Jesus wept. Right? The shortest verse. But we see the compassion of Jesus. Not just in that one verse, actually throughout the whole thing, but we see the compassion of Jesus. Then we also see Jesus' power over death. Lazarus, come out. And listen, it wasn't, I don't believe in looking at this and everything. I don't believe that he walks out. It's not like that he just walks out. I'm here. Because it says that he's still bound. He's still got stuff on his head. His head's still bandaged up. And most likely his feet are still bound. That's why Jesus says, loose him and let him go. So he probably's coming out like this. Right? He's probably hopping out. That's where we get the Easter bunny. He hops out. No. I'm playing. That's not true. I just made that up. It just popped in there. But we read all of these things and we ask, how can Jesus make my impossible possible? And I don't know how he makes all of our impossibilities possibilities, but I know this, that he has the capability of doing it. And I would even go this far, even if he doesn't, he's still worthy of my life, of my praise, of my love, of everything. In Job, Job's facing all these difficulties, and his wife says to him, why don't you just curse God and die? And you're like, woman, are you foolish or what? Now this is the SRV part, okay? The Scott Russell version. You crazy? You mean I'm not going to accept all the bad stuff that comes along, I'm not going to accept that, but all the good stuff I'll keep? You know, what's wrong with that? And it says, if you continue to read that in Job, it says that in Job's ways, he was not found guilty because of his words. Listen, whether he does or whether he doesn't, can I tell you today, just like the 3 Hebrew children where they would tell King Nebuchadnezzar, our God is able to deliver us from that fiery furnace, but even if he doesn't, I'm not bowing. We're not bowing. And so, how does Jesus make our impossible possible? Well, we ask, if, right? If Jesus will do this, then this will happen. And really, as I studied, man, I've got so many notes that aren't even in this, which is good for you. But in John chapter 11, verse 17, and also in John chapter 11, verse 32, I'm going to go to those 2 passages because there's something I want you to see in here because I believe it really speaks to us. In verse 17, it says this, when Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away. Let me say this about 4 days. See, when he tells them to roll the stone away, and Martha says, but Jesus, he's already going to see. See, decomposition was already taking place in his body. You ever been around rotten food? Maybe not exactly the same, but you know, you get the picture. None of you are ready for lunch now, so I'll just keep preaching for the next time. I'm going to preach you hungry. Verse 19, but many of the Jews that had come with Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother, as soon as Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Then Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Lord, the impossible would have been possible if you had been here. Yet even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Your brother will rise again, Jesus told her. Martha said, I know that he'll rise again in the resurrection at the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die, ever. Do you believe this? And she goes on with her response. But then verse 32, when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and told him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. They must have gotten their stories together. If we say this enough times, maybe he'll feel bad. You should have been here. If you really loved me and if you really loved him, you would have been here. The big if. Don't we have it? Well, if my spouse would be like this, then. Or if my spouse would have done this, then. If the Rangers just would have scored a few more runs, then. I say this by faith today. When the Cowboys beat the Packers today, then I'm going to dance. No, anyway. Oh, don't do that. I'm ordained with the Assemblies of God and we can't dance. But if we doubt, listen, if we doubt that he wants the best for us and has the best for us, if we doubt, we will then always question what he says and his motivations. God just doesn't want me to have any fun. God just doesn't understand my needs. And we begin to question. Listen, I don't believe that there's anything to ask the question sometimes in evaluation. Why did I get fired? Well, if I would have shown up to work on time more often, maybe I wouldn't have gotten fired. Hey, that evaluation is a good evaluation. That's not a bad question. If I would have shown up at all, maybe they'd have kept sending me a check. I don't know. Right. Listen, I'm not saying that if questions are horrible. I think if questions are bad if they cause us to begin to doubt who he is and his ability. In fact, if you were to read this, I believe it's in verse 37, it says, couldn't the one who healed the blind man save this man from dying? Now that's a reference back to chapter 9. So the story is out. Jesus can heal the blind. And it's out. And now they're going, well, I thought he was good. I thought he was able to do all of this stuff. Or if he's so good, if he would have been here, he wouldn't have died. Of course, Jesus' response to them, to his disciples earlier, he says, I'm glad I wasn't there. This is SRV, not exactly. This is the way I've got it in my mind. He says, I'm glad I wasn't there because I'm about to prove to you. I'm about to show you the glory of God. I'm glad you weren't there. See, we will question what he says in his motivation. Isn't that what got Eve in a little bit of trouble, and Adam, I guess, as well, right? Now the serpent was the most cunning of all the wild animals that the Lord had made. And he said to the woman, did God really say you can't eat from any tree in the garden? The woman said to the serpent, we may eat the fruits from the trees in the garden, but about the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden, God said, you must not eat it or touch it or you will die. Well, in my reading, and listen, I wasn't there, but just in my reading, he didn't say anything about touching it. He said, do not eat it. Right? So here's the enemy. Well, did he really mean? I bet he didn't mean that. He's just wanting you to not have some good food. Oh, and that food is so good. No, he didn't really mean you're going to die. What he meant is that you're going to be fly. Some of y'all catch that later. Sorry, that was rough. Take that one out of my notes. It's not there. No, you will not die, the serpent said to the woman. In fact, God knows that when you eat it, your eyes will be open and you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. And here's the truth. You know, the enemy, when he comes, and he didn't tell a lie, did he? She didn't die instantaneously. Her spirit did. And that means her body would begin to face and see corruption. She would eventually die. And that's what the enemy wants to do. Oh, no, it's going to be fun today. But isn't that what it says about sin? That sin at the moment seems pleasurable, but it leads to destruction. And when we begin to question God, if you would have been here, if you would have changed that circumstance, if you would have done that for me, if you would have done this for me. And the truth is when we begin to question Him, we begin to doubt His goodness and His faithfulness, and we begin to come to a place where we don't trust Him anymore, and we don't trust Him anymore. Well, is He really going to come back? Man, it's been a long time. But can I tell you something today? Jesus' timing is always perfect. Jesus always has the best in mind for us. I've said this before. I remember, listen, when you're 12, 13, you do some dumb things. Now, let me rephrase that because I don't want to be mean or too harsh there. You don't know what you don't know, right? So you're 13 years old and you think, well, this young lady's got to be the right lady. And I thank God for those relationships because they prepared me for the greatest relationship short of Jesus Christ. The greatest relationship I had, it was Tiffany. But if that 13-year-old would have gotten his way, I'd miss God's perfect way. You get that? Because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. We think, well, this would be best, and I want this right now, right now, right now, right now. And Jesus saying, just hold your horses. My timing and my way is perfect. But God, if you really loved me, if you really wanted me to have the best, then He goes, no, if you really wanted the best, then you'd wait on my best. See, what happens when we begin to question what the enemy is trying to do, he's not trying to get us to evaluate ourselves. What he's trying to get us to do is to begin to doubt His love and to doubt that He has the best in store for us. And so this morning I ask you this question. What are the ifs? What are the ifs that are holding you back? What are the ifs that are defeating you right now? Well, if God would have, and all the enemy is doing is he's coming and he's bringing that. Why? Because he's trying to get you to doubt. He's trying to get you to step out sooner than you should. He's trying to get you to accept a counterfeit. He's trying to get you to receive something that's not God's best. He's wanting you to just, if. I don't know, as I read this, and man, I read it 100 times, and there's a lot of things here. Man, go to John chapter 11 and read it. It is outstanding. And when you get to that part that Lazarus come out, do this for me. Come out! Just do that. I'm telling you, do it and it'll do something on the inside of you. You'll probably stand up and get excited about Jesus or something. If not, you'll at least laugh and say, Pastor Scott's crazy. No. But what are the ifs that are holding you back? See, they were holding back Mary and Martha. If you would have been here, my brother would not have died. If they would have recognized why Jesus was doing it, don't you know they would have been like, as soon as they saw Him, Jesus, I'll show you where He is because I know what He's getting ready to do. Come on. I want to see this thing happen. And they wouldn't have said, oh, but he stinks. It's like, oh, good, Jesus is going to clean him up real fast now. I won't have to smell him anymore because he stunk before he got in that tomb. Now he really bad. Right? And in our own personal faith, we don't always see tomorrow and the days after. But listen, if we believe that Jesus has the best for us, then what we do is anticipation. We start looking. Oh, I'm getting ready to step over into something I'm getting ready to go over in the next several weeks. Listen, if we begin to get that expectation, we begin to look at all the things going on. And we go, oh, thank God, if Trump and Hillary are the best, then that means Jesus got to be coming back soon. Or sin abounds, grace much more abounds, right? But the point is, listen, look at all the nonsense going on. Jesus got to be coming back. There ought to be something stirring on the inside of us. In fact, Scripture says that our spirit begins to yearn and strive. We shouldn't become fearful. Well, if Jesus would just come and help us, then we wouldn't go through all this stuff. Listen, this means we're getting close to the end. Don't fret. Don't give up. Just keep pressing. Keep hanging on. Because, man, when we get to the end of it, we're going, oh, right? The big if, what's holding you back? Well, if my parents would have been different, then I'd have served God all my life and I wouldn't have gone through all that. Okay. That's it. But today, can't do anything about what happened yesterday, but what about today? Let's deal with today. Let's quit blaming it on mom and dad, all the other stuff. And when I say that, I'm not devaluing it or belittling it or making fun of it at all. Listen, stuff happens. People are people. People do dumb things, and I just thank God for the grace of God. But listen, you're here today. Don't quit saying, well, if this would have happened 20 years ago, we're not 20 years ago now, we're right here. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? I'm going to ask Sean to come. Listen, the song that I've asked him to come back and play is today's song. He's a good, good Father. He is perfect in all of His ways. He is perfect in all of His ways. There's some things I don't understand. I don't understand all of His ways. That's the desire of my heart. I want to know all your ways. I want to know all of His ways. Because when I know His ways, then listen, then my ways can come to a place where I just rest. He's a good, good Father. He's better than good, good. He's awesome, awesome. He's great, great. He's loving, loving. He's forgiving, forgiving. He's healing and healing. All the things that you are in need of, He is that. That's what Jesus said. When He says, I am the resurrection, you can almost change that and take off resurrection. And you can say, I am, to you today, He's saying, I am your healer. I am your deliverer. I am your second and third and fourth and fifth chance. I am your forgiver. I am the lover of your soul. I am your comforter. I am your companion. I am. And today I'm going to tell you something. He is whatever you are in need of. Don't say, well, if Pastor would say the right thing, then I'd come. Listen, you know right now, in your spirit, you know right now. I'm going to ask Sean to play, and I want you to come. Don't let the ifs hold you back. The wine maker and the distance healer and the long time in coming healer and the feeder of the 5,000 and the water walker and the blind restorer and the one that can raise that which is dead to life is here for you. Come. If you'll stand all across this place. Today's the day for you. Today's an opportunity for you to receive. See, the enemy will always go, well, if you go up there, and what if nothing happens? You remember the last time you went, and you went and nothing happened. What if that happens again? You'll be so embarrassed, and people are going to be looking at you going, oh, I wonder what's wrong with her, or I wonder what's wrong with him. Hey, listen, Who cares? What I want to know is what He says about me. And what He's saying today is, I am yours. Don't let the if hold you back. Come now. Because He's a good, good Father. Come. Come. Come on. Pursue Him. Seek Him. Whatever it might be. Come on. Come.